Hey Journalism 1 class, it's Liv, and today's my day to present. So, we're going to be learning about the Sedition Act of 1918. What sedition means is conduct or speech inciting people to rebel against the authority of a state or monarch. Now that you understand the concept, let's find out how it started. The original Sedition Act was passed in 1798. This is when John Adams was president and we were in the quasi-war. The law included making it illegal for anyone to write, print, utter, or publish anything that went against the United States. It said that citizens of the United States could not take part in any acts against the government. The Sedition Act was not renewed when Thomas Jefferson became president because he believed that it violated the First Amendment and was biased against Democrats. America wasn't always planning to participate in World War I. In fact, our president at the time, Woodrow Wilson, ran a pro-neutrality campaign. What changed? Germany would just not leave us alone. They kept sinking our ships, and they even tried to get Mexico to declare war on us. After we had stayed neutral for so long, we finally had to go to war against Germany. On these days in 1917, Woodrow Wilson approached the government and asked them for their permission to go to war against Germany. Three main effects from joining the war were bringing back the draft, the Sedition and Espionage Acts. The Americans elected Wilson based off of his pro-neutrality campaign, and then he sends them to war? And then they already don't like the draft, and then he puts that on top of the war? How can the Americans be happy? To answer the question, they weren't, and they spoke out against the war. The government, already concerned about enemy spies in the mix, didn't want to add cities erupting in violence to the list, so cue the Sedition Acts. Americans did not stop protesting. In fact, over 2,000 of them were prosecuted. Whoa. Stop right there. Yes, World War I led to the Sedition Act, but you have to remember that the Sedition Act was an amendment to the Espionage Act. So, what was the Espionage Act? The Espionage Act made it a crime to give away any information that could impact the war negatively. What is the difference between the Espionage and Sedition Acts? The Sedition Act took the Espionage Act to a much larger scale, this meaning that while the Sedition Act covered military, government, and war, the Espionage Act only covered war. The Espionage Act covered speaking out negatively pertaining to the military, while the Sedition Act included the military, the war, and the government. So, what was the Sedition Act of 1918? What were the consequences for going against the amendment? You could have to spend 20 years in jail, or up to $20,000 in fines. Court cases involving the Sedition Act. Schneck versus U.S. In this case, Charles Schneck sent over 10,000 pamphlets out that encouraged people to reject the draft, directly violating the Sedition and Espionage Acts. This case went all the way to the Supreme Court, and the judges ruled in favor of the U.S. government because Schneck was seen as clear and present danger. This court case was so important because the Supreme Court declared the Espionage Act as constitutional, therefore declaring a claim on how far the First Amendment right goes. Who was involved? Woodrow Wilson, president during the time of the Sedition Act of 1918 and during the time of the Espionage Act of 1970. Postmaster General Albert S. Burleson was the one who checked your mail, trying to see if you violated the Sedition Act or the Espionage Act, and if you did, he reported you to the government. Attorney General Thomas Walker Reed was the main supporter of the laws and came up with the idea for the Sedition Act, thinking that the Espionage Act wasn't enough. How did this impact society? The majority of the public were afraid to speak about anything because innocent people were facing punishment too. No one trusted anyone, and no one believed that they were safe. Journalists could not cover their stories, and they had to censor their writing. Because of their limited stories, they couldn't keep all informed. How did this affect First Amendment rights? The Act completely violated First Amendment rights. The government gave their own definition of free speech rather than what it should be and what it is today. This shaped what free speech and freedom of the press means today. What happened to the Sedition Act?
It was appealed, but Questions?